No kidding. We will go. It's a place. Okay, devotees, Hare Krishna. Let us begin our fourth evening on Vaishnava Etiquette. Let us begin with some prayers. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyachadeshatarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pramanityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripas sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, devotees, we are in the middle of offering obeisances. And there's more. We discussed last night different things, panchanga, pranams, ashtanga, pranams, these interesting subject matters, and when you might offer one type of obeisances, when you might offer another, these sorts of things. And we're going to continue discussing about obeisances, because we're just in the middle of it. But before we do that, there is something, devotees, would you believe, which I forgot last night. Regarding Srila Prabhupada's humility. It's, anyway, just one of those stupid things. I had arranged to play a recording of Prabhupada speaking, but then I forgot to have it played. Oh, Krishna. So, we already we've been through humility. It was such an interesting discussion. But I guess we are going to play it right now. You may have heard it. It's Srila Prabhupada talking about Sanatan Goswami and Madan Mohan. You heard that one? Maybe. How Sanatan Goswami would offer whatever he could collect by begging, which sometimes was extremely little. But he would just tell Madan Mohan that this is what I've got. Madan Mohan would complain a little bit sometimes. Can't I at least have some salt with my bati? Bati being little bread balls. And Prabhupada's talking about this. Then Prabhupada just talks about offering something to Krishna. And Prabhupada becomes very emotional, just for a couple of seconds, but it's really, wow, very, very striking. Now, Arjuna Charan Prabhu, have you got?
Krishna, just like Madan Mohan. He was talking like Sanatana Goswami. Madan Mohan, Sanatana Goswami in that dry chapatis and it is stale and don't give me little salt, how can I eat? Sadhana Goswami says, sir, why shall I go? Whatever I get, I offer you. You kindly accept. I cannot go, old man. So Krishna had to eat that. Because the bhakta, when he is offering, he cannot refuse. Jimam bhaktya is it. Real thing is bhakti. What you can offer to Krishna, everything belongs to Krishna. What you have got, what is your value? And what is the value of your things? It is nothing. Therefore, the real thing is bhaktya. Real thing is your feeling. Krishna, kindly take it. I have no qualification. I am most rotten fallen. But I applaud this thing for please say. These will be accepted. Don't be perturbed. Always be careful. You are dealing with Krishna. That is my request. Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Phew. Srila Prabhupada. There's really a lot to Srila Prabhupada, more than devotees may think. Yes, so that was just a little more Srila Prabhupada, his humility, extremely amazing devotee, Srila Prabhupada. But otherwise, we are in our section on obeisances, offering obeisances, and of course we, as I said, we already went through a certain amount. And let us just to get off to a start, let me just read the first thing that I read last night, Srimad Bhagavatam 8.23.2. 8.23.2. Bali Maharaj is speaking about offering obeisances and the value, the benefit of offering obeisances. Bali Maharaj said, what a wonderful effect there is, in even attempting to offer respectful obeisances to you, speaking to Lord Vamana. I merely endeavored to offer you obeisances, but nonetheless the attempt was as successful as those of pure devotees. The causeless mercy you have shown to me, a fallen demon, was never achieved even by the demigods or the leaders of the various planets. So the point and principle there is that there's great value even in some small effort in Krishna consciousness. You know, there's the famous verse, the very famous verse, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse, 40? What is it? Neha Bikrama Nashosti. Let me just get it. Neha Bikrama Nashosti. Pratyavayo navidyate. Swalpamapyasya dharmasya. Trayate. mahato bhayat. In this endeavor there's no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. So, of course, our focus is etiquette and how to conduct oneself and interact with others and like that. But so this particular point is kind of like secondary in terms of our context in this seminar, but still it's really worthy of being noted that you make some effort, even a small effort, in Krishna consciousness, even a faulty effort, and still you get a great result. Yeah. And Srila Prabhupada actually, in a class on this particular verse, you can look it up if you want, it's in the folio, Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 40, to illustrate this point, how just a little effort can bring a great result. Prabhupada tells a story. It's actually told by Jiva Goswami and Bhakti Sandarbha. Srila Prabhupada tells a story of a mouse who was living in a temple where they had no electricity. So, I mean, maybe it was before the time of electricity, or maybe just they had no electricity. But this mouse would live just from getting little scraps of whatever he could find around. And sometimes when he couldn't find anything, he would climb up the stand of the oil lamps. They were using oil lamps for lighting the altar. And he would climb up and sort of over and drink the oil in the oil lamp, which was feeding the wicks. You know how candles work, and so you might know how oil lamps work. You just put a piece of string in. Doesn't have to be, just a little piece of string in the oil. So one end's in the oil, the other end is out, and you light the other end, and it sucks the oil, and it can burn for hours, burning the oil. Otherwise, if it was just a piece of string, it would burn up in a minute or something like that. So one day this mouse climbed up and over, and he's drinking the oil, and he slipped into the oil and drowned. But as he slipped in, he knocked the end of the wick, because you got to adjust these wicks every now and then so they really burn properly. So he knocked the end of the wick, and as a result, the wick burnt longer. So it was sort of a service. In effect, it was a service to the deity. So the question is raised. Prabhupada tells the story. You can read it. The question is raised. What happened to the mouse? Now the mouse is dead. And the answer is, the mouse went back to Godhead, because unknowingly he did some service. Interesting, isn't it? So, yeah. Anyway, that's sort of by the way, really, more than anything, because we are talking about offering obeisances. And I told you, last thing I told you last night was that I would tell you the story, which you must have heard before. No, you've heard it anyway, of the first time I offered obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. The second time I saw him, the first time I was just a total non-devotee like you wouldn't believe. My gosh. Hare Krishna. Just completely, totally in another world and not the right world. But anyway, I ended up joining the temple in London on January the 7th, 1973. And in, I think, April, George Harrison donated Bhaktivedanta Manor. And shortly after, maybe in May or June or something, Srila Prabhupada came to see Bhaktivedanta Manor and to spend some time there. And as always happened when Prabhupada came, a few hundred devotees came all over England, but all over Europe, Germany, France, Holland, particularly those places, and some other places to some degree. So there's a whole lot of devotees, like 300 at least, maybe 400 full-time devotees. And Prabhupada came from Heathrow Airport by helicopter and landed in the grounds of Bhaktivedanta Manor. And the devotees then queued up from the helicopter around to the back of the manor, which was what we were using as the main entrance, and then in through the manor. And I don't know if you're familiar with Bhaktivedanta Manor, but around to where the entrance, the actual entrance into the temple room is, where the stairs go up to Srila Prabhupada's rooms and various other things upstairs. So I was one of the new boys. So I was right at the end of the line, at the bottom of the stairs. And Srila Prabhupada came around. And as Prabhupada's coming around, devotees are offering obeisances like a domino thing. Prabhupada's coming, and they're offering obeisances. And so he came around to where we were, by the temple room entranceway and at the bottom of the stairs, and we offered our obeisances. Haribol. That's what we're talking about, offering obeisances. So we offered our obeisances. A few of us were there at the end of the line. I think I was maybe the very last one at the actual end of the line. So we offered our obeisances. Panchanga, if you remember, Panchanga, hands and knees. We offered our obeisances, but then Prabhupada stopped. Not in front of me, in front of the devotee before me. And we're down. And Prabhupada stopped and started having a conversation with Brahmananda Swami. And there was one other also, I think sannyasi there, some other senior devotee. So they're having this conversation and we're down because we're offering obeisances. But now Prabhupada stopped for like 30 seconds or something, and we didn't know what to do. Should we just get up and say Hari Bol, Jai Prabhupada, and just carry on with life? Or should we stay down? And when in doubt, stay down. Yeah. So we stay down. We are down. Eventually we're down for a good couple of minutes, actually. So the devotee next to me, Prabhupada's right in front of him, like, I don't know, a meter or half a meter or something like that. So this devotee next to me, he slowly put his hand out. Slowly put his hand out and out and out and out and out and touch Srila Prabhupada's lotus foot. So he's here, and now I'm here. So now this devotee who touched Prabhupada's foot, he turned to me, because we're down, So he turned to me, and I turned to him, and he turned to me and went, nodding his head and just, like that. So, okay, all right. So I put my hand out slowly, but Prabhupada was further away from me. So I had to really stretch. And so I'm stretching out, and Brahmananda Swami saw me. And he had this big, serious danda. I mean, it was must have been really heavy. So there's my hand going out, and he's talking with Prabhupada, but he took his danda and went bang on my hand. So I pulled my hand back. And the other devotee next to me, he's watching all this. So I pulled my hand back. But then again, he's down. He went, he sort of mouthed, go on. Something like that, a little more discreetly, but so, okay, second time. Shh. Out goes the hand, and quietly, and Brahmananda's occupied with Prabhupada, and hand goes out. But Prabhupada's further away. So, hand goes out, and I have to go out. And I just touch Srila Prabhupada's lotus foot. So, and the benefits, in my case, I'm still here. And I think that's probably why. No other good reason I can think of. Yeah. So offering obeisances is, there's a lot more to it than just some sort of formality or, just doing the right thing or being respectful. It's a very deep type of exchange. And therefore, we read, for example, when Lord Nityananda, well, a couple of things with Lord Nityananda actually, but when he was on his pilgrimage, he left home, he was 12 years old. He left home with a traveling mendicant. But then he went off on his own after a while, and he went to, I don't know if it was Ayodhya or some place connected with Lord Ram and Lakshman, because Lord Nityananda is Lakshman. And he went to that place, and he offered obeisances in front of the altar of the deities, probably of Ram and Lakshman, Sitaram, Lakshman, Hanuman. And he offered his obeisances for 6 hours. Yeah. He offered obeisances for 6 hours. When he and Madhavendra Puri met, they offered obeisances to each other and embraced each other. And they remained sort of offering obeisances and embracing at the same time, also for at least 3 or 4 hours. Yeah. So offering obeisances, it's a big thing. Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, he had a special program, sadhana, like a very rigid sadhana. He would chant 64 rounds a day. He would give class on Lord Chaitanya for 3 hours a day. He would offer obeisances to deities 1,000 times a day. And he would offer obeisances to devotees 2,000 times a day. And his maintaining of that was a vow to do those things. He vowed to do exactly those things. And that he upheld that vow rigidly. Chaitanya Charitamrita says that his vow was so fixed and like unbending that it was like lines carved in rock. You know, if you've got some sort of like a diamond blade or something like that, you can carve lines in rock. And those lines don't flex or anything like that. They're permanent. So his vows were like that, including offering obeisances. But when he became old, it became very difficult. So there's a story in Bhakti Ratnakara how Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, how some devotees were visiting Radha Kund. Raghunath Das Goswami was living at Radha Kund. So some devotees, a small group of maybe 3 or 4 devotees there visiting Radha Kund, so they decided to go around and visit the different temples, because even at that time there was a number of temples around the banks of Radha Kund. So they came to one temple, and there was Raghunath Das Goswami on the ground, prostrate, offering full dandavat, pranams on the ground in front of the altar. So those devotees, they came in, they saw him there, and they offered obeisances, and then they got up, and now they're looking at the deities. But then they noticed Raghunath Das was still prostrate on the ground. And then they realized he can't get up. He just physically can't get up. So they lifted him up and they sort of dusted him off a bit, and he thanked them and said, yes, you know, it's difficult. I'm very elderly. And they told him, you know, you're such a great devotee. You don't need to do this any longer. Particularly when it's just physically, it's just not possible for you. So all you need to do, just come in front of the deity and just offer your pranams, just stand there, offer some prayers. Krishna will understand. And Raghunath Das said, okay, yeah, I'll do that. Thank you. Thank you for the advice. Thank you very much for the advice. I'll do what you've said. The next day, that same group of devotees went around Radhakund again. And lo and behold, when they came to the same temple and they came inside, there was Raghunath Das Goswami prostrate on the ground, just offering his dandavats. And they offered their obeisances. And then they understood, this is just Raghunath Das Goswami. He does these things. So they just left him. It was obvious that this was what he wanted to do. So, offering obeisances. And we should, as we mentioned last night, we shouldn't do lazy man's obeisances. Yamaraj Prabhu, can you come forward and demonstrate? Do it again. That's lazy man's obeisances. And then there's jackknife obeisances, just choo, choo, down and up. Haribol. No, we don't do like that. Obeisances are a very deep exchange between us and the Lord, or us and other devotees. Yeah. So there's a few more things here I wanted to read out. Here's an interesting thing. It's from part of the Bhagavatam that we have been reading just recently. Daksha and Lord Shiva. So I'll just read a little bit from the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th canto, chapter 3, verse 22. Prabhupada says, it's just a very interesting point. It's not exactly like a very sort of common point or something like that, but it's there. So Prabhupada says, it may be argued that since Daksha was the father-in-law of Lord Shiva, it was certainly the duty of Lord Shiva to offer him respect. In answer to that argument, it is explained here that when a learned person stands up or offers obeisances in welcome, he offers respect to the super soul who is sitting within everyone's heart. It is seen, therefore, among Vaishnavas that even when a disciple offers obeisances to his spiritual master, the spiritual master immediately returns the obeisances because they're mutually offered not to the body, but to the supersoul. Therefore, the spiritual master also offers respect to the supersoul situated in the body of the disciple. Like I said, this is not a regular thing. You don't really find it. I don't know if I ever saw it with Srila Prabhupada. In fact, I don't recall having seen Srila Prabhupada do like that. But in some cases, it's done. So that's an interesting point. I could tell you one little story. It's not obeisances actually, but it's humility, it's related. Humility, obeisances, they're related. Srila Prabhupada was flying out of somewhere in America, flying somewhere to somewhere else. And so all the devotees came to the airport. You know, in those days, in airports there was no security at all. And you could sort of do what you liked. And the devotees, particularly in those days, they'd have kirtan, and it would all be happening in the airport. So there are so many devotees there. They were blocking the way in the airport. And some official asked whoever was the senior devotee, can you just clear a way through so people can come through? So the senior devotee stood up on one of the seats and made an announcement that the airport authorities want us to clear the way. So Prabhupada was sitting on one side, and then there's like a corridor going through, and then devotees were sitting on the other side. Both devotees were sitting everywhere. So the senior devotee said, so could all the devotees please move over to this side over here? So the other side was free, and he was meaning Prabhupada sitting there, so Prabhupada can sit there, you know, without a big conglomeration of devotees. So then he said, okay, everyone move over, yeah, you move over here, and you move over there, and move over this way, yeah, and a little over, yeah, like that. Then he looked over to see what Prabhupada was doing. Prabhupada wasn't there any longer. Prabhupada had moved over to the other side as the announcement had been made. Yeah. Okay. So here's a couple of things now, devotees, from Nectar of Devotion. In Nectar of Devotion, 7th chapter, you get all these devotional activities listed out, or maybe it's the 6th chapter anyway, it's there. 64 devotional activities. And a few of them involve offering obeisances. So first one is offering respect to the banyan trees. And Prabhupada says, in the Skanda Purana it is directed that a devotee should offer water to the tulsi plant and amalaka trees. He should offer respect to the banyan tree, Ashvata, the cows and the Brahmins, and should serve the Vaishnavs by offering them respectful obeisances and meditating upon them. All of these processes will help the devotee to diminish the reactions to his past sinful activities. So Tulsi, of course, I mean, obviously, we do that. Every day we have Tulsi Puja and we offer our obeisances. But it's not just Tulsi. Amalaka. You know, if you know amalaki, the fruit, down in the Japanese garden. I haven't been there for years, but there used to be an amalaki tree in the Japanese, you know the Japanese garden? The Japanese garden. past the hypermarket, you know? The north.
There are 2 trees there.
They're still there, yeah?
Here.
Amalaki.
And the Devon Botanical Garden.
Oh, is it?
We have 2 here in our property.
Amalaki.
Yeah, that's Hamla fruits. Isn't that
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is it really? Okay, I didn't know that.
They have one in the Tulsi Garden and one just down here.
Oh, okay. I was not aware. Maybe you can point them out to me. So, you know, Amalaki trees, we should offer respect to. We definitely have 2 tamal trees, and they are, you know, they're special. They should be looked at. You know, we should look out for them. And banyan trees. We don't have banyan trees, but they're worshipable and can be offered obeisances to. Then another one from that list, offering obeisances to the spiritual master. Listen to this, devotees. One should not offer obeisances silently to the spiritual master. Or in other words, one should recite aloud the prayers to the spiritual master while offering obeisances. What do you think of that? That's interesting, isn't it? And one devotee, Trivikram Swami, who's one of the old disciples of Srila Prabhupada from sometime in the 60s, he told me that once he had just read this, and then he went in to see Srila Prabhupada, and he offered dandavats to Prabhupada, and loudly he recited Prabhupada's pranam mantras, and then he got up and looked at Prabhupada, and Prabhupada had a big smile on his face. Right. Now here's another one from the same list. Actually, the heading, if you want to look it up in Nectar of Devotion, is bowing down in honor of the deity. And listen to this. This is very interesting. This is really very interesting. In the Naradiya Purana, there's a statement about bowing down and offering respect to the deity. It is said there, and now it's quoting from Naradiya Purana, a person who has performed a great ritualistic sacrifice, and a person who has simply offered his respectful obeisances by bowing down before the Lord, cannot be held as equals. That's the quote. And now Prabhupada explains. The person who's executed many great sacrifices will attain the result of his pious activities. But when such results are finished, he has to take birth again on the earthly planet. However, and listen to this, devotees, the person who has once offered respects, bowing down before the deity, will not come back to this world, because he will go directly to the abode of Krishna. How's that? You know, it's when we read things like this, when we hear things like this, how special what we're doing is. And even, you know, sort of like, quote unquote, small things that we do, how big they are, how they're not small, then hopefully it really drives it into our heads, and we get greater appreciation for them. And therefore, when we do them, we really do them with greater concentration and focus. Yeah. Anyway, we'll be talking about prasadam in due course. But, one crumb of prasadam. Well, look what happened to the mouse, right? And that was just the oil from the oil lamp. The mouse went back to Godhead. But then there's us, or some of us, at least I know it has happened in the past. Maybe we're more Krishna conscious now. But, it's a feast day, and there's some special preparation which is just wow. And we think, I got to get as much of that as possible. And we just overload the plate, and we just cannot manage it at all. And then so we put it in our cupboard, in our room, and forget about it. And a few days later we open the cupboard and we see it sort of, going off a little, and we throw it away. If we appreciate prasadam, more, or if we really appreciated prasadam as we should appreciate it, oh my gosh, we would never do such a thing at all. Yeah, so people do these big sacrifices, and some of them do huge sacrifices, massive, for a month, 24 hours a day, ghee is being offered into the fire for a whole month. 24 hours a day, and sometimes for years. At the beginning of the Bhagavatam, Sutta Goswami arrives in Naimisharanya, and there are the sages, Shonaka Rishi and the sages, and they were in the process of a 1,000-year sacrifice, and offering mantras 24 hours a day, offering ghee 24 hours a day. But the benefit, Prabhupada says here, the person who has once offered respects, bowing down before the deity, will not come back to this world, because he'll go directly to the abode of Krishna. Okay, and then there's another one. Under expecting the Lord's mercy, and this is a real classic. In the 10th canto, 14th chapter, verse 8, it is said, "My dear Lord, any person who is constantly awaiting your causeless mercy to be bestowed upon him, and who goes on suffering the resultant actions of his past misdeeds, offering you respectful obeisances from the core of his heart, is surely eligible to become liberated, for it has become his rightful claim." So it's a combination of things, but including offering obeisances, respectful obeisances from the core of the heart. Okay, we'll move on now to C, is meditating upon the deity. And of course, this is not a small subject, meditating upon the deity. But I just wonder, last night we didn't have time for questions. Anyone have a question, any point they'd like to raise about obeisances or anything at this point, feel free to say if there's anything on your mind. Oh yeah, we need the microphone, that's right.
Hare Krishna Srila Gurudev. So you were telling the story about the mouse, and I was just thinking about something that you mentioned in the beginning of the course, like why we observe Vaishnava Etiquette, because to go back to the spiritual world, we need to, be able to engage in the activities there, not, the activities that we engage in here. So how is it that the mouse goes back, even though he hasn't gained the taste for the high activities?
Yes, right. I mentioned that Jiva Goswami and Bhakti Sandarbha, he tells a number of such stories. The point is that devotional service is so just fantastically beneficial that even if it's done unknowingly, is still a great result. May be there. Not necessarily in every case, but particularly if someone does service in an inoffensive way. Yeah. So, there's another story there. This is from Jiva Goswami. Well, Prabhupada, in the class on chapter 2, verse 40, if you've got the Prabhupada's books and lectures and things on your device, look it up and read it. But the point is, the simple point that Neha Bikramanashoste, the benefit is just so tremendous. Yeah. That doesn't mean that we should start thinking now that, I'm fully engaged and I'm following the principles and chanting my rounds, etc., etc. So I'm fine. I'm okay. We shouldn't start thinking like that. But at least we should appreciate that it works like that, or it can work like that, or at least sometimes it does work like that. Jiva Goswami there tells the story of a pickpocket who was looking for a good place, a good spot for picking people's pockets. And he went into one temple and saw it was packed. And it was easy just to go around and pick people's pockets because they're all jostling around and they didn't notice. So he decided to make it his spot. And so he came every day. And because he was there every day, he took one particular little corner one side, and it was his spot. And what he did, because he was there every day, he cleaned that little spot. And so every day he'd come and he'd clean his spot, and then he'd pick people's pockets. So Jiva Goswami explains, at the end of his life, he went back to Godhead, because he cleaned the temple every day. And he tells the story of a bird. A bird was in a tree by a temple. And a hunter came and shot the bird. And the hunter had a pack of dogs that would go running out and get whatever he'd shot and bring it back to him. So the dogs went running out like having a race. Who will get the bird first? And one dog got the bird first. But the other dogs were chasing that dog. So that dog with the bird in the mouth, and the bird is dying, the bird is not dead, but the bird is in the process of leaving his body. So they chased the dog around the temple 3 times. And then the bird died, and the dog took the bird back to the hunter. So Jiva Goswami says the bird went back to Godhead because he circumambulated the temple 3 times. Yeah. And believe it or not, there was a prostitute. And one Janmastami, she fasted and did all she could to attract business, but couldn't attract any business. But she didn't eat, she didn't sleep. She went back to Godhead because she fasted and she didn't sleep on Janmastami. And believe it or not, this is something quite something from Nrsimha Purana. There was a drunkard and his girlfriend living in a village, and they would disturb everyone. So one day the people just threw them out of the village and said, just get out and just don't come back. So they went wandering off. So that night they didn't know where they're going to stay. They found an abandoned temple. So they went in, and the whole night they shouted at each other and fought and argued and drank liquor the whole night. So the temple was an old abandoned temple of Lord Nrsimhadev. That night was Nrsimha Chaturdasi. And because they stayed up all night and they didn't eat anything, and they just stayed awake all night, then, in his next life, the drunkard became Prahlad Maharaj. This is Nrsimha Purana, and Jiva Goswami is saying. So, there's immense potency. There's immense potency. Okay. Any other comment or yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you for the class. So, I think I was reading it from this manual, somewhere in the manual, and I just wanted to get your clarification on it, like somewhere in this manual, or I read it somewhere else, I'm not sure, about when the curtains are closed for the deities, that we shouldn't offer obeisances yet when the curtains are closed, when Krishna is sleeping. But then I read it, but I still see but still devotees, we still do that. So can you get clarification on that?
We spoke about that last night, that, this is a compilation from different sources, and the compilers have kind of expressed their own opinions in some places. And, sometimes in some different literatures, one thing is said about something, and somewhere else another thing is said about the same thing. And so we made the point, and the point is there, that in the process of deity worship, when you enter the altar, one doesn't offer obeisances on the altar. One should do that outside. That's the practice in deity worship. So that was really the point. Otherwise, what I would say would be, Hare Krishna. It's good to offer obeisances, and Krishna won't mind. Yeah, Krishna won't mind. Better to offer obeisances. Prabhupada, and we mentioned last night, Giriraj Maharaj told me, and you heard also, that when the curtains are closed, and if you're chanting japa circumambulating the altar, that you shouldn't chant too loud, because Prabhupada said, Krishna will hear, and Krishna, being unable to see his devotee, Krishna will feel frustrated. So, but these are sort of like special considerations. They're not really like normal considerations. And so those particular points, which, like I say, we read last night, or anyway, they were in the appendix, I think. They're not really very important. Better to offer obeisances. Yeah.
So then also when the curtains are closed and with the whole circumambulating thing, what about circumambulating the temple when saying all the curtains are closed? Is that us?
No, you should it's a devotional principle. It's in Nectar of Devotion. Circumambulate the temple at least 3 times a day.
Even when the curtains are closed?
When whatever. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Oh, okay. Right.
So I just like to add, Maharaj, that's an issue outside India. In India, there's no access to the temple. Sorry.
Okay.
That's an issue outside India because in India, there's no access to the temple.
There's no
access to the temple, to the altar.
Oh, to the altar.
The doors are shut, closed.
Yeah.
So you're not allowed. You can't go inside to offer obeisance because you cannot enter the temple throughout India.
This is particularly in regard to pujaris.
I'm sorry, I think I'm not understood. There are times when you can enter the temple, and when the deities are resting, you cannot enter the temple.
Oh, I see. The temple is closed.
Shut, closed, yes.
Yes. So
there's no issue there.
Oh, okay. Haribol. Okay. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So we'll continue tomorrow with meditating upon the deity.